Well, Allison Moorer has long been one of my favorite singer-songwriters, and recently she's become one of my favorite writers. She's written two just beautiful memoirs that I have told so many people to read, and I've given them as gifts to so many people. It's that kind of book. You want both those kinds of books. You want other people to read them. And so I'm so tickled to be talking to her about Lark Ascending. She's one of the very first people to read this book. And so I'm excited to hear what questions you have, Allison.
Well, Silas, I have to say thank you for sharing this book with me. You are also one of my favorite writers, and I was delighted to get an advanced copy of Lark Ascending in my hands. Um, I was deeply touched by this book and the characters in this book because as I read the book, um, and I have to tell you that it has really influenced my thinking of late. Dealing with climate disaster, climate change, where people go when a place is uninhabitable, what they do, what they eat, how they get along, what becomes important,
Right.
what becomes essential. And I thought about that a lot as I read Lark Ascending. How much were you influenced by thinking about things that have happened like this in the past?
Mhm.
And how much are you drawing from what could happen? Because unfortunately, we have seen this extremism in the world before. And, what's happening now is a new story, but it is related. So,
Right.
sort of a past future, like, how did you do that dance?
Well, for one thing, women have less rights now than they did when I sold this book a year ago. So that's how quick things can happen, you know? And the other thing is, every scenario that's happening in this book is happening already somewhere in the world. I mean, one aspect to this is that LGBT relationships have been outlawed, and that is absolutely true in some countries already. And we're seeing, measures to erase LGBT people right here in America. So none of it is very far fetched, unfortunately. And I was just sort of forecasting out 20 years. If the worst happened, then what would that be? What would that
Mhm.
be like? That was the main thing I was trying to think about and world build. And just briefly, you mentioned what becomes essential in a
Mm.
situation like this. And having read the book, you know that one thing for them is music. And I thought a lot about, what would be the songs we would just sit around and sing, in a post electric world when you can't play recorded music. And so John Prine shows up in there, because I thought people would be able to, any gathering I've been to where there's a guitar and somebody who can sing, somebody ends up singing Angel from Montgomery that night, and
Absolutely.
and things like
Absolutely.
that. So I thought a lot about that, and music is one of those essential things that I think we'll always cling to right to the end.
It sure is. It
It,
sure is. And I loved the way you used that. And I loved the way you drew those female characters so strong. Yet, when Arlo and Sarah died, there's just such breakage.
mhm.
And, I wanted to ask you first of all, you have described this book as brutal. I agree with you. And I know you as a person of tenderness and gentleness. And this is writer to writer. How did you write that violence?
It wore me out and it broke me down, and I thought if it's going to work, then it has to break me down. I think there's a real thin veil between the writer and the reader. And so if I want the reader to feel something, I have to feel it. At the same time, I always wanted to balance all that brutal stuff out. The darkness has to be balanced out. So there has to be hope and light and joy and moments of wonder, just like Seamus, the dog.
Yes, that's why he's here because of wonderful Seamus in the
Yes.
book.
And so that's why Seamus is there in the book, because he provides so much joy and hope. And, dogs aren't aware of their own mortality as far as we know. And so Seamus is able to move through this devastated landscape with so much, more joy and wonder. And those little breaks with him, I think, help get us through it, and it helps Lark get through it too.
Did you always plan on giving Lark Seamus, or did you have Seamus
Well, you
first?
asked earlier if any of this grew out of real things, and one thing that inspired this book is that I read about in 1939 when the Blitz started in London. The government encouraged people to euthanize their pets because they were afraid the pets would, be roaming and starving, and they thought it was the humane thing to do. And so something like 750,000 pets were put down in 1 month. And I thought,
Mm.
that is so powerful. On cue.
Like that.
And, I thought I've got to use that, and so Lark encounters this sort of rogue dog that has learned to survive because its previous owner has taught it to not bark, to be quiet,
Mhm.
which I think is such an interesting thing for a dog, to be taught to be quiet.
I know, I'm whispering. Well, Silas, I just could not love it more. The way we make a family is as varied as the family.
Uh-huh.
And that is within this book. And that is such a lovely, lovely sentiment. So thank you. I better see what's going on.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Bree.
Silas.
Big love to y'all.
You too. I see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.